All right, today we're going to dive deep into one single but incredibly influential document, Vladimir Putin's 2021 essay on the historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians. We're going to walk through the key arguments and the historical story it tells, just to really get a handle on the perspective it puts forward. So this essay was published right on the Kremlin's official website, and it really lays out a detailed view on the shared history between the two nations. Our goal here is not to take sides or anything like that, but simply to neutrally explore the narrative and the political arguments inside this one document, just so we can understand the viewpoint it's coming from. And right from the get-go, the essay hits you with its central, most foundational claim that Russians and Ukrainians are one people, a single whole. This one idea is the absolute core of the essay, and every other argument is built on top of it. Okay, so let's dig into that core idea. One people, a single whole. The way the essay presents this, it's not just some historical footnote. It's framed as a current reality, one that's been, well, fractured. The essay calls the wall that has emerged in recent years between Russia and Ukraine a shared tragedy. And it blames this split on two main things. Mistakes made in the past, and this is key, the deliberate efforts by those forces that have always sought to undermine our unity. So, to back up this huge claim of one people, the essay dives way back into history. It argues that there's this common origin story, a kind of shared cradle that goes back more than 1,000 years. And here are the three big pillars of that origin story. The essay argues that Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians are all descendants of the same ancient Rus. They were bound by one language, Old Russian, and united under one faith, Orthodox Christianity. It also specifically refers to Kyiv as the mother of all Russian cities. This timeline here kind of lays out the historical story the essay is telling. It starts with this big, unified state back in the 9th century, but then the Mongol invasion causes it to splinter. For centuries after that, a lot of these lands ended up under Polish and Lithuanian rule. The whole narrative then pivots on this one major event in 1654, the Pereyaslav Council, which the essay frames as a reunification with Moscow. Okay, now we're jumping forward to the 20th century, which is a huge focus of the essay. The argument here is really critical of the Soviet period. It basically says that the Soviet Union played a decisive and, frankly, artificial role in creating the borders of modern Ukraine. I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, right? Modern Ukraine is entirely the product of the Soviet era. The argument is that after the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks carved out the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic from lands that the author describes as belonging to historical Russia, often without much regard for who actually lived in those regions. And this quote, wow, it really sums up the feeling in the essay on this topic. It's this sense of a historical injustice, that the way the Soviet borders were drawn wasn't just made up, but that it represented a direct loss to Russia. To make its case, the essay points to a few key moments. First up, 1922, with the founding of the Ukrainian SSR. Then you have 1939 and 40, when lands from what was Poland and Romania get incorporated. And finally, that 1954 decision by Nikita Khrushchev to just transfer the Crimean region from the Russian to the Ukrainian Soviet Republic. The essay also brings up these two historical ideas, Polonization and Latinization. It presents them as these old policies that aimed to convert Orthodox people to Catholicism, which, in the essay's view, created an early cultural and religious division. All right, now let's shift gears to the period after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The essay argues that from that moment on, Ukraine's independence was steered into what it calls an anti-Russia project. The argument here is that Western countries purposefully tried to turn Ukraine into a geopolitical barrier. And the author asserts this wasn't just about politics. It involved forcing a change in identity, making millions of people deny their Russian roots, and promoting what it calls blatant, aggressive Russophobia. And this comparison here really lays out the two paths the essay presents for Ukraine. It's a very black and white choice. You have the anti-Russia project on one side, which the author says leads to foreign control, economic ruin, and a loss of identity. And on the other side, a partnership with Russia, which is framed as the path to true sovereignty, mutual benefit, and cultural connection. And to back up that claim about economic decline, the essay brings out some numbers. It highlights that back in 2019, Ukraine's GDP per capita was less than $4,000. It even points out that this was lower than in Moldova or Kosovo, and it concludes that Ukraine became Europe's poorest country because of the path it chose after 1991. So, this all leads us to the essay's grand finale, its proposed vision for the future. The author ties the entire concept of Ukrainian sovereignty directly to its relationship with Russia.
And here it is, the ultimate argument in a nutshell. The author says it flat out. I am confident that true sovereignty of Ukraine is possible only in partnership with Russia. Any other path, in this view, leads to being dependent on other powers.
The essay wraps up with this appeal to what the author calls shared spiritual, human, and civilizational ties that were hardened by common trials, achievements, and victories. These bonds, the text concludes, are the real foundation for a prosperous future together.
And then we get to the very last line of the essay. It makes a definitive statement that Russia will never be anti-Ukraine, and then it puts the ball squarely in Ukraine's court. And what Ukraine will be, it is up to its citizens to decide.
So remember, this essay came out in the summer of 2021. It laid out a very specific, detailed worldview. And that leaves us with a really crucial question, doesn't it? How does understanding the perspective inside this document help frame the context for the events that followed?